Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, the place for internet technology professionals whose work-life balance plan has imploded. We are here to provide solutions that will help the IT pro live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, this is Joanne Victoria, the I Know What Works coach, and I'm the host of the Sanity Project podcast. I partner with IT professionals in telecommunications, technology, entertainment, and mass media industries whose work-life balance plan has imploded and who want more success, more confidence, more fun, and inner peace. The Sanity Project podcast is a platform for experts in the personal development and IT communities to share their wisdom, expertise, and solutions that will help the IT professional live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Our guest today is Jenn Hand. That's Jennhand. Jenn Hand is a food and body image coach, creator of the Normal Eaters Club, and founder of Jennhand.com. She helps women transform their relationship with food, fall in love with their bodies, and, become one of those quote-unquote normal eaters. Jenn Hand is also the podcast host of Cake Doesn't Count, which I think is a great title, and Cake Doesn't Count. And what Jenn will be helping with today is helping you feel sane around food, which is a huge issue. And speaking for myself, if I've got it in the house, it's in danger of me eating it. So welcome to the show, Jenn Hand.
Thanks, Joanne. I'm excited to be here and dive into this, yes, big issue that so many people struggle with.
Well, when you say feel sane around food, what do you mean by that? Are you talking about binging, or are you talking about not being mindful when they're around food? How would you explain it?
So I like to think of feeling sane around food as something where food is a part of our lives. We derive pleasure from it. We can enjoy it. And it's also sort of in the background. We don't obsess over calories. We don't have to work off the 2 pieces of cake we had last night. We don't have to exert all of our willpower not to eat that cookie in the break room. So it's something that is sort of unique to each of us, but where food becomes just something that we take pleasure from, we enjoy, and it's also not dominating our every thought and waking moment.
Well, I know that there's always a shift and a change that can come when you look at your body and decide maybe you want to release 15 pounds to fit into your winter wardrobe. But so your mind, you have a different change in your mind, and if you don't go down a different path while you're trying to make these changes, nothing is going to change on the outside, because you have this deep groove inside your mind, inside your brain, even inside your body that says, no, do this because that's what you're comfortable with. Does that make sense to you regarding the mind? Yeah.
And I love that you use the term groove, because that's often something I talk about with the people I work with, is that we have this groove in our brain of the things we do around food, our habits and reactions and behaviors. And it's not that, and it's usually so deep because it's been years and years and years of doing these things. And it's not that we just stop doing everything completely. It's like we create this other groove that becomes more well-worn over time and becomes our default, with new habits and new patterns and new reactions and behaviors around food that happens step by step by step by step. It's not that we just overhaul our lives all at once and we have this new groove. So I really like that you use that term. And I truly believe that so much of what we do with food is changing from the inside out, is looking at, okay, well, why are we eating, or why are we coping with something with food, or looking at the role that food plays in our lives, and sort of working on that inner stuff to help the outer stuff change. And a lot of that can be simultaneous. Like we might work on the outer and the inner, but some of the biggest changes happen when we look at the things behind the food. And I think what's so often hard with diets is that they give us a food plan or they give us the specific regimen to follow, and it's very externally focused, and we can forget about, okay, well, we're following this plan, but at the end of 30 days or 6 weeks, we're like, now what do we do? Because we're not following the plan, and we didn't look at all the behaviors or emotions or nuances around why were we using food in the first place. And so it can often lead us with this feeling of like, oh, what am I going to do now? So yeah, I love that concept of changing from the inside out, because so much of real lasting change really does come from the inside.
Yeah, most change does. I mean, if it's not an addiction to food or cake or whatever, however you want to label it, it's going to be addiction to something else. And, hopefully it would be, a healthy outlook on life, but it requires a lot of work to move out from that deep groove that is embedded in us for decades for whatever reason. We were given food as a reward, it was a punishment, whatever it might be. It was either broccoli or cake, right? And I mean, it's one or the other. And to create a new path, or that it becomes the new groove, the healthy groove, the purposeful groove that's going to keep us sane, it takes a while. It's not overnight, and it's not 6 weeks. 6 weeks is a beginning, barely a beginning. So it's good that you are out there coaching women on how to look from the inside out. Why do they eat what they do? Why do they react the way they do around food? I mean, some of it is most of it is comfort, I would imagine, but comfort from what?
I think when I like that you brought the idea of like the 6 weeks is a beginning, because oftentimes we have this idea in our head that it'll take X amount of time. I mean, we make up these arbitrary time frames in our head, and if we don't lose the 20 pounds or not emotionally eat or end up binging at the end of 10 days, it's like, oh, we're a failure and it hasn't worked. And that can kind of send us into the spiral. But the reality is that it's exactly what you're saying. That's the beginning. And it's not that we do something for this amount of days or these amount of weeks and then we're done. It's looking at our relationship with food and our bodies in a new way to say, yeah, this is a lifelong path. Just like we deepen our relationships with our friends, our significant others, people who are close to us over many, many years, and we continue to develop that. It's the same thing with our own self, is that we don't just, after 6 months we're done and we should be fixed. It's like that relationship with our bodies and loving ourselves, accepting ourselves, being sane around food happens step by step, and it deepens over time. So yeah, it is. I remember for me just feeling that discouragement of, oh, I've spent a year on this, why am I not completely 100% quote unquote fixed? And it took me a while to realize that, as cliche as it sounds, it really is a journey. It's this lifelong practice. And I'm a big yoga person. They'd always talk about it's a practice, you're going to be doing this forever. And I try and take that into my life to say, this is a practice. It's not something that I figure out how to eat dinner for, every day for the rest of my life, and then I'm done. It's like you tune into yourself each day and look at your body's needs and wants and emotions and habits, and you keep working at them. So yeah, I think some people can be scared off by that term of it takes work, but it's not like manual labor work. It's just that inner work of looking at perhaps some of the things we don't really want to look at, but we need to. So it's the reward is incredible, because then you end up feeling sane around food, where you don't have to white knuckle and use willpower and have this discipline for the rest of your life. It's a very balanced approach to food.
Well, I think that people are lazy by and large. And I mean, sincerely, I will put myself into that category. From time to time, I'll just go, oh, I'll just let it go. But you can't. And it's just that we were taught wrong in the beginning. Whoever taught us inappropriately about the topic today is food. So somebody taught us wrongly about food, eating too much, not enough, the wrong foods. And things have changed over the last several decades where food is more unsafe than ever. Because it has too many chemicals in it. If it's processed, you have a problem. You have to be cautious about what you eat. And didn't have to worry about that a long time ago. The older people didn't have to worry about that because they just, whatever they had was relatively fresh. Even if it came from a can or frozen, it was close. But it didn't have chemicals in it. And now the chemicals screw up the people's bodies as well. Can make you sick, and you think, oh, it's the food. No, it's not the food. It's the chemicals that they pour in there. And it's just a healthy lifestyle. And if people want to be healthy and live long, they need to change the way they eat. There's no two ways about it. And as I said before we started the show more than once, if it's in my house, I will eat it. I can't buy a package of cookies, which I'm not supposed to eat anyway. But if I did buy a package of cookies, I can't eat 1 or 5. I will eat the entire package because it's here. It's there. I bought it. I made the mistake to bring it in the house, and it's in the house, and I have to literally throw it in the trash underneath other trash that I would not go through to get to it. It's like the old days of running out of cigarettes. If you ever smoked, people who are listening who smoked in the whatever, it's not the old days. A lot of people smoke now, and they're down to their last cigarette, and then they go rummaging for a long cigarette that might be left in the ashtray. You need that fix. So you need a cake fix, you need a cookie fix, you need a mashed potato fix, whatever kind of fixes that your clients come up with. But it's a lifestyle change. And it's not easy because you're creating a new groove, a new pattern, and you have to be mindful about that and willing to do whatever it takes. If you're not willing to do whatever it takes, don't bother. I mean, seriously, those are tough clients.
So it's funny that you talk about the, not bringing cookies home. And because I remember telling someone once that she asked me, well, what do you do if you have food in your house that you just, you can't stop eating? And I said, there are times when I'm feeling sane and normal and I can have a plate of brownies and not eat all of them. And there are other times when I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put the brownies in my husband's trunk and he's going to take them to work tomorrow, or I'm going to give them to the neighbors or I'm not buy them in the first place. And I think the idea of setting yourself up for success, like if you're the type of person who can't have cookies in the house, I mean, we have enough temptations in the world as is. So it's like, okay, just honor that. You don't have cookies in your house. So, but I remember the woman who I told, she was like, oh, really? Like you do that? I thought it was wrong that I had to throw out the food or give it to the neighbor or make my kid take it to school the next day. And I said, no, it's not wrong. It's just honoring where you are. Like if you just really can't have them in your house, don't have them in your house. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I think that's, with all the temptations we have in the world of going out to eat and being at the store and, going in the break room at work or being in the teacher's lounge or having your kids party, whatever it is, there's so many opportunities to have sweets and to, have to say no and use that willpower. So it's like, well, when we're at home, we might as well set ourselves up for success. And I think that's normal, to be honest. I would say if you can't have cookies, don't have them in the house.
That's the only way for me, at least. Fortunately, I'm not supposed to eat wheat, but I ignore that from time to time. So there are ways of getting around everything if you want to, but you're only fooling yourself, because that's what I would say to myself. Nobody else cares, Joanne, except you. So why are you hurting yourself? But I think that we think of food as a reward, or we deserve it because we've lived life for a day or some such nonsense. It's like, I'm home from work. I deserve a cake. I deserve whatever. And it's not just sweets, although sugar is probably the biggest killer that we have. But sweets is a big part of it.
Yeah, and with the women I work with, and even for myself in my own experience, learning how to reward ourselves without food is a skill to learn or, a habit to develop, because most of us have been taught, you get A's in your report card, here's some candy, or you were really well behaved, here's a piece of chocolate, or if you eat your vegetables, you get dessert. So it's like we've learned that food is this reward, and it's unlearning that to say, okay, well, how do we reward ourselves and without using the chocolate cake? And it really is a new habit to start putting into practice, to say, right, how do I feel rewarded if I'm not using food? And it's what's interesting is that so many people say, well, it doesn't feel the same. If I reward myself with a good book on the couch, or taking myself out for coffee, or going to get a manicure, or whatever it is, it doesn't feel the same as eating 4 bowls of ice cream. And that's true. It doesn't feel the same. It's like learning that sort of emotional maturity to say, yeah, it doesn't feel the same, but I'm learning how to feel that reward in a different sense, rather than using food as that solely my reward for living, essentially.
Well, my question is, why do we think we need to be rewarded for being alive?
You know what? Maybe that's the question to really answer. I think because we often feel overtaxed, like, oh, I did 27 things on my to-do list today and I'm exhausted and I need a reward for myself to keep going. So it's maybe like, well, let's look at the, cutting down that to-do list and not taking on so much, so we
Correct.
don't feel like we need the reward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about it now. I've never thought about it before in this context, but we do we do what we have to do. If we have a long list, we cut it in half and pick top 4 things to finish every day, and that's fine. 4 big things is enough to get to your bigger thing, whatever it might be. But why do we need to be rewarded just for being alive? I mean, and there, as you say, there are other ways. You can read a book, you can read another book, you can go for a walk. But those are things you should choose to do just because they should be part of your life, not as a reward for something. I mean, you can pick and choose, but I think we lump food into areas where it doesn't belong. We need it for sustenance. We can find ways of eating whatever works for us to keep us healthy and keep our brain moving forward. But, that cake or that cookie or that pizza, God forbid, I can't even touch pizza anymore. But that pizza is not a reward, it's what you want, So people have to make that distinction. Do you want this? But there are repercussions for certain things that you eat. Do you know what's going to happen before you put it in your mouth and after you put it in your mouth? Yes, and you're going to do it anyway? Fine. It's called being a responsible adult. And I don't know where that rant came from, but I don't think it's being presented well as this issue that mostly women have with food. I think we're as a group, there's a lot of lack of confidence. And at least when you eat the cookie or eat the cake, you feel good. And when you feel good, you think you're confident.
Yeah, and I think it's, zooming out into the bigger picture, a part of feeling sane around food is looking at the ways we use food not for sustenance. So if we're eating when we're bored, or eating when we're stressed, or eating when we're overwhelmed, it's looking at that piece of it also, because you're right. I mean, food is, we eat because we need fuel, we need calories, we need nourishment, we need nutrients. But what else are we using that food for? And I think that's, when we're talking about food as a reward, having that, other categories lumped into that as well. Well, are we using food to relieve boredom, to relieve stress, to cope with overwhelm, to cope with sadness, to a feeling of loneliness, and looking at that, the role that food plays, other than, it just being, okay, we're fueling our bodies. Because the reality is, I mean, we all grow up with baggage around food of our mom showed us love by giving us food, or, our grandma made us eat 3 pieces of cake because she made it at home and she wanted us to, show us that she cared about us. So it's like we all have these sort of ways we've learned food as love, or food as something other than what it's meant to be.
So Looking at what you're saying, listening to what you're saying, and what my mind is saying right now, if our parents, grandparents, family, hands-on loved us more when we were younger, since that's where it all starts, because by the age of 7-ish or so, it's kind of done, we would feel better.
We have to blame it on them, our parents.
Well, if we had, it's not a blame so much, it's just a cultural thing. Some of them didn't learn, some of them to change from what their parents did. But if we were loved more, if we were touched more, if we were hugged more, whatever, we would have a balance. A balance would be created in our psyche that, food is food and love is love, not food is love. Do you hear what I'm saying?
That would be such an interesting theory to test somehow. I mean, that's beyond my scope, but to see how, if someone's parents did show them love in the appropriate way, would they be as influenced from the media? We're with the media of being thin, you have to be this size, look at this person who's this shape. Would there be less of an influence because you already feel enough and accepted and loved? So that would be such an interesting sort of maybe whole other discussion. But
yeah,
I think the media, so many of the women I work with, the media is such a big influence because they think they need to be a certain way, look a certain way, have a certain size. And it's like, that's just compounded with the fact that they didn't get the love and the feeling of acceptability and feeling of enoughness from their parents growing up.
Why do you think some of your clients are so bound up in what the media shows them about bodies?
Well, I think it's, when you are unhappy with your body and you're trying to lose weight, I think you become a little bit more immersed in this world of, trying to find a diet that works, or trying to find a book or a program or a food plan that fixes your problem, your quote unquote problem. And often that's a lot of social media and a lot of consumption of magazine covers or advertising images that we see or TV shows that we watch. And it's just sort of often being in this society, we have a very, unless you sort of counteract that, I don't even want to call it brainwashing, but this idea of you have to be this size that's so pervasive in our society, it's like you can't help but get drawn into that. And I think when someone is really self-conscious about their body, they turn to other images maybe as inspiration in the beginning, or I want to look like this, or I want to look like this old picture of me, or this person in the media. But it often can become a very dangerous game to play because it's like it perpetuates this idea of that the only body size that is acceptable is this one that the media projects. And I think it's gotten better definitely the last, I would say probably the last 5-10 years with TV shows having different sizes and having more body diversity in the media and social, on social media channels and that kind of thing. But I think when we're in that diet world, it can be very easy to get caught up in the size, the size, seeing sizes that maybe are unrealistic for our body shape or our body type.
Yeah, I mean, if you're 5'10", you're not going to be a size 2, and unless you're a model. And models, designers design clothes for hangers. They don't design clothes for people. So they need a size 0 or a size 2 in a woman, mostly young, because, they don't know what's going on yet, but mostly young girls who have no body fat at all, and women are supposed to have curves to a certain extent. That's why we're women versus the men. But when the designers design, they design for a hanger and a flat chest and no butt and no nothing. So to compare yourself to a model, which is a lot of what is out there, and then or the girls who should be women, but the girl/women who go down to a size 2 or a 0 or maybe even, God forbid, a 4, and then they add breasts, implants. So where is that, what does that do to somebody's mind who is very delicate in this world of food? How do they figure out what's good for them? And that's where you come in.
Yeah, and we've actually talked a lot about this in the Normal Eaters Club that I run, because part of the healing process in the road to sanity is filling your social media feed or what you consume in the media with things that uplift you, that are positive, that make you feel good. If you go on Facebook, on Instagram, and the only thing you see are thin, young, white girls, I mean, your perception of the world is going to be totally different than what it actually is. And so we work to have change what we're consuming, essentially, because I think I've been so far removed from that world now, because my social media and the things I read and what I surround myself with isn't the Cosmo magazines and the fitness magazines and that kind of thing that are like, lose 10 pounds in a week or get stronger glutes and a sexy butt. Like, I mean, that kind of stuff is so far removed from what I consume that it's hard to believe when I see it in the checkout line at the store. I'm like, oh, that people still read that stuff. So because I haven't been in that world for so long, it's finding, I was given the space to find what my size for my body was, essentially. And that's what I help other women with, is to see, okay, apart from the media influences that you have, what is a natural weight for you? I mean, what does that look like? Because if we're eating 800 calories a day when we were in college, and that we think that's our ideal size, I mean, that's not realistic. So it's kind of letting go of the media influences, of the perceptions we have about what we're supposed to look like, and finding out, okay, for our body and our genetics and our type of build, what is our normal, quote unquote, normal weight?
Yep. We start off as babies eating baby food, and we die as babies eating baby food. So in between is up for grabs. You can't do much about the beginning or the end, but it's, this body issues and the food issues in relationship to the body are huge. And I know that there are some women who are pleased with their body type, even if they are large. But to me, I think they could be unhealthy. I don't know. I don't try to get engaged too much in that. But, I'm a woman. I've been around for a while, and I've tried different types of diets, quote unquote. But, there's a book that says diets don't work, and they don't. It's a lifestyle change, and I'm glad you're helping people with that. You can reach Jenn at jennhand.com. That's JENNHAND. Her new book is out, How to Be a Normal Eater, Finally Making Peace with Food and Live a Life Free from Dieting. See, just like I said, free from dieting. And be sure to listen to Jenn's podcast called Cake Doesn't Count, and consider joining her Normal Eaters Club, which you can check out at jennhand.com. Is there one final thing you'd like to say to our audience, Jenn?
Yeah, I think if you are the person that struggles with food, that struggles with weight or your body, understand that it's a step-by-step process. So you don't need to overhaul every single thing in your life after this podcast. And, it's great to be inspired and to have motivation for change. It's just focus on 1 to 2 things, maybe drinking more water or adding more vegetables or getting more sleep, something tangible, something that's concrete, but that's 1 to 2 items, and not that you're overhauling, not adding 27 things to your to-do list. So that's what I would leave people with, just to feel like you can make some good progress by focusing on something very specific.
Yes, and I will tell you people as well that the brain only likes to do one thing at a time, so don't give it too much work. I ask that you share this podcast with anyone you know, as well as re-listen to it over and over again to see if you may have missed something. And then go to iTunes and give Jenn Hand a 5-star review. And if you could give a nice review for my podcast, the Sanity Project podcast as well, I'd appreciate it. You can also go to my website at askjoannevictoria.com and click on products and look for the Be Your Authentic Self program, which is a self-study system you complete by yourself in your own time. It includes a suite of PDFs, audios, and videos, and it retails for $297, which I like to say is cheap at 10 times the price. If you have any questions about this podcast or anything else, please email me at askjoannevictoria.com. I thank you for listening. I thank Jenn Hand for being here, and I look forward to tomorrow. Thanks, Jenn.
Thanks, Joanne.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoannevictoria.com and continue the conversation on my podcast page. And get a free copy of my book, The True Self Handbook, a guide to transform your life. That's AskJoannevictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.